All right, so since Kamala Harris took over as the top of the Democratic ticket, she's definitely had like a honeymoon phase, right? And I think part of that is because she picked Tim Walz, who was the best possible VP option. And so really the vibes are high. The energy is tremendous. The polls have shifted colossally. But to my surprise here, you have Joy-Ann Reid, MSNBC host, loyal Democrat. She comes out and she has a dire warning for Kamala. Listen to this, guys.
Early Saturday, an Israeli airstrike hit a school serving as a shelter in Gaza, killing at least 100 people and wounding nearly 50 others, according to Palestinian health authorities. On the same day as the strike, Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the loss of civilian life.
Yet again, there are far too many civilians who've been killed. I mean, Israel has a right to go after the terrorists that are Hamas. But as I have said many times, they also have, I believe, an important responsibility to avoid civilian casualties.
Uncommitted and anti-war voters see a reset with Harris on Israel and Gaza. Her language is different, capable of moving the needle and gaining favor with some of the voters who rejected President Biden over his stance on the region. But language is not enough. This was a school serving as a shelter for refugees of war, attacked during morning prayers. Witnesses said children, women, and old people were inside sleeping, and that the school was hit without an evacuation warning from the IDF. President Biden has faced months of public pressure to cut off the supply of weapons to Israel amid its war on Gaza, which has killed about 40,000 people since October. It's why the squad, all elected officials of color, are demanding a ceasefire, despite being targeted for removal from office by staunch supporters of the Netanyahu government and the ongoing bombardment of Gaza. The world is on edge right now, and rightly so. The U.S. is sending more troops to the Middle East to bolster defenses as Israel braces for an attack by Iran. So far, Vice President Harris has shown herself to be better positioned than President Biden to bring the party together on this issue. But we have to remember, Harris is still the vice president serving in the Biden administration. So her policy, should it differ from Biden's, isn't anything that she can implement now. Though it's absolutely fair for people to ask, why are we giving bombs to Israel? And would she keep that policy in place as president? These questions will surely be visible during the Democratic National Convention next week. And how the party answers could impact the election, not to mention the lives of so many Palestinians who have suffered for much too long. For God's sake, this needs to end.
That is not so subtle support to the protesters who were chanting at her rallies and interrupting her. That's what that is. And she's saying, for God's sake, this has to end, man. Credit to Joy Reid. She's 100% right. Look, best case scenario with Kamala, if she wins, if she just reverts to being a normie Democrat on this issue, just a normie Democrat, not a hardcore Zionist like Joe Biden. If she just acts like a normie Democrat and responds to real-time political pressure, then there would be a harder line drawn with Israel. There would be either cutting off the weapons or a threat, a credible threat to cut off the weapons, which changes their behavior. That's best case scenario. I'm under no illusions that she's going to, demand that Netanyahu gets arrested before the end of the week, right? I'm under no illusions about that. I wish that was the case. That's not the case. But even if she's just a normie Democrat, she'll be better. But what Joy-Ann Reid is saying here is, look, it is perfectly legitimate and justified for activists and protesters and people who don't want to see babies get bombed, for them to say, you're the vice president now. You have to prove to us your policy is going to be different than this genocidal policy brought about by the top of the ticket, Joe Biden, or I should say the current sitting president, Joe Biden. You have to prove it. You have to prove it. And look, the fear is when Kamala Harris goes out there and talks about a ceasefire, right, that she means it in the same kind of bullshit way that Joe Biden means it and Netanyahu means it. When Joe Biden says a ceasefire, what he really means is let's have a temporary pause and get the hostages back. That's all he means. And then after that, a week, 2, maybe 3 at most, then Israel can go back to doing whatever the fuck they want to do. That's what Joe Biden means. And that's why his version of a ceasefire is unacceptable. In fact, he's just factually wrong using that word to describe the thing he supports. This is something Adam Johnson points out all the time. This is what they mean when they say ceasefire, right? So even with Kamala saying we need a ceasefire, we need to get the hostages home, you need to make clear when you say ceasefire, you don't mean temporary pause. You don't mean let's just take a little break on the genocide and go right back to the genocide and the ethnic cleansing immediately after. So you need to it's incumbent on her to make that clear. It's incumbent on her to make that clear. So picking Tim Walz was a great sign. He's the best of all the bad options. He's the best of them, right, on this particular issue. And now she's saying some of the right things, but we need a true, firm commitment that this is going to end completely, right? And even Joy Reid is out there. This is basically a warning to Kamala. It's like, look, you got to say the right thing. You got to do the right thing. Because if you don't, people are going to be totally, completely, and utterly justified in being pissed off at you, not helping you in your campaign, not voting for you, etc. This is her in a subtle, not so subtle way saying, man, those protesters are kind of right. If it's not okay to violate decorum and protest at a rally for this, then it's never okay to protest for anything. Because genocide is the crime of all crimes. It's the worst imaginable crime. And so, yes, it's perfectly legitimate and justified to do this protest. Yes, it's perfectly legitimate and justified to try to get ironclad commitments. Ironclad commitments. And so, she's out there leading the way. I'm surprised that MSNBC hasn't fired her yet, to be honest, the way that she's talking about this issue. She's talking about this issue on some real shit. On some real shit. She's surprised me. Joanne Reed has surprised me on this because normally she's the biggest rah-rah Team Democrat player of all time. But now she's balancing that with, hey, I'm anti-genocide. This needs to totally stop. That's correct. She's right. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.